Hi, this is Melody Gray with the Houston Drama Club. This podcast is meant to help promote plays and musicals here in the Houston area. Our website is www.houstondramaclub.com, where you can find upcoming and currently playing productions. So join me while I go out into the Houston theater community to find out what's going on. Join the club and let's go see some theater. This podcast is brought to you by Playdate. Playdate is a Facebook app created by Adina Owen that shows you all the plays going on in Houston every day. Use it to find out what is playing so you can go see some live theater. Go to Facebook and type in Playdate, 2 words, to find the app. Also, if you want to promote a play that is not listed, write a post on the comments and Adina will add it. Now, on to today's podcast. Today we are promoting the Catastrophic Theater's production of Tragedy, a Tragedy by Will Eno. Following is a recording of the Talkback that happened this afternoon after their matinee, moderated by Rob Shimko. It's about 40 minutes, so perfect for a long morning commute. Here's Rob.
My name is Rob Shimko. I'm the company dramaturg for Catastrophic Theater, and the rest of the time I'm the director of the School of Theater and Dance over at UH, and one of the things I do is moderate our talkbacks. And so I'll ask a first kind of question to get us talking, but while we're doing that, try to think about questions you would like to ask. Tamarie is, of course, the director, and everybody else you just saw perform. And so think about if you have comments. We love to hear things that you found yourself thinking about while you were watching the play. Our other co-artistic director, along with Tamarie, Jason Nodler, has a great thing that he likes to ask, that I've come to like to ask too, which is if your mind sort of wandered somewhere in your past experience, or you said, like we're really interested in like where your head went and that sort of thing. So Tamarie, one thing I think people are always interested in is how companies choose their seasons. And I know that Catastrophic, of course, has a long history with Will Eno, and Will was here last year, or actually earlier this year, January of this year,
right.
For Wakey Wakey and other of his shows. And in a weird way, that was one of his most recent shows, and now we've got his first published play. So we're going from very recent Will Eno earlier this year to very, very early career Will Eno. So could you talk a little bit about how this play was selected and sort of what it means?
Sure. Play selection is always an exciting time and also sort of maddening because you're reading like 50 different plays, and there's the plays you always have in the stack that you're trying to work in somehow, but then you have to make the whole thing go together as some sort of cohesion. So Jason and I were going back and forth. We were definitely inspired to include Will because of when he came here for Wakey Wakey, just getting to hang out with him and meet him. He was so charming and quirky and just everything you could imagine in the best way of the playwright. And so we were like, let's look at his plays again. We did consider actually the realistic Joneses, but we had presented Lisa D'Amour's play Detroit in 2014, I believe is when it was, and there's something similar, actually. And they're both wonderful. They're both playwrights that we just bow down to, but there's something very similar in the structure of the plays. And so when reading the Realistic Joneses, we felt like it was too similar to something we'd already presented. So then we just started grabbing all the different Will Eno books and latched onto this one. It just felt so timely as the entryway. I feel like with a lot of the plays we do, there is some sort of external piece of the onion to peel back that's also sort of the gateway into the play. So you just watched this, and obviously there was a large component that is a satire of television news media on the 24-hour coverage, but then it goes beyond that, becomes a wonderful absurdist existentialist sort of crisis. And as I think is like the criteria for basically every play we do is it has to be about mankind figuring out just what the fuck it means to be on the planet, and how does that make any sense? Can we make sense of the unknown? So this obviously has that in it too, and we were on a austerity budget plan, So we needed to find something that wasn't another like 25 people with a band kind of thing. And we're like, hey, this one works there too. But we were really excited. It felt so timely, even though it was his first play. That particularly, I mean, Houston has even more of a, I think, latch into this, even with us just all watching the coverage of the last storm too, just seeing that. So
yeah, and it's interesting. I immediately, and we all during that first table read, first night of rehearsal, we all ended up talking about the local reporters during, Hurricane Harvey being out in the field for 36 or 48 hours and how they look, And so I brought that up when I was talking to Will, and if you didn't see it, there's an interview in the program. And one of the things that we talked about was he was like, you have to remember, this is a pre-9/11 play. And the model for continually covering and covering and covering something by these same reporters, and almost that sort of like endurance test, didn't exist quite in the same way. And so he said it's not really as, you might think now that I started by wanting to satirize, like long-form news coverage, but I really didn't start there. I started just wanting, like with an interest in sort of people falling apart.
Right.
And he talked a little bit about his mom and stuff like that. So it's really interesting as a time capsule. And I had never... I hadn't thought about it. I have thought about it, but I hadn't thought about it in the same way that there sort of are pre-9/11 and post-9/11 American plays in certain regards, which is an interesting thing to kind of think about. Let me ask the cast a question, and then the audience, please keep thinking about what you want to talk about as well. I'm also interested in, because Catastrophic has an unusually long rehearsal period. It's usually more like 5 weeks than like 3 weeks or something, which gives it sort of a longer time to percolate. And so I'm interested in asking the cast, sort of from first impressions, either from your first read at home, or from your audition, or even from the first night of reading the play as a group, from those early impressions to what you're doing now, have things changed in the way you experience the play? Things you've noticed in the play, getting your head around who these people are?
Somebody go.
I could keep elaborating the question.
No. Like John in the field?
Yeah.
I know it's a
No.
comedy, but as we were working it, and Tamarie's so great at just like, even just the nuances of just the small things to just make it really funny. It's a tragedy, obviously, but there's so much humor in it, and just that rehearsal process gave us enough time to really dig into that too and find both sides.
I always feel like it's just enough time to learn all my lines. But I gotta say, like, kind of going along with like how you pick your plays, I gotta say, Tamarie, I'm always surprised and impressed that you guys are able to, from the script, be able to see the thing that takes us so many weeks to find in rehearsing, and you guys can see that in the paper. Because every time I read a script, I'm like, yeah, it's all right, I guess. And then by the end of rehearsal, I'm like, wow, this is really great. I should really invite some people to come and see this. Such a good show. I didn't know. I wish someone had told me.
I can attest to that, because you've said that about a lot of
Yes, he has.
Every play I've ever been in, I'm like,
That is the JaVon Jackson process.
But then in the end, it's so good. So.
Anyone else?
Greg, you've known this play for a while.
Yeah. Like, I don't know, maybe a decade or so ago, I designed the set for another one of Will Eno's plays, The Flu Season. This was included in the little book that I ordered, and I read it and I thought, oh man, I can't wait till I'm old enough to play Frank. And it only took 10 years and more gray in my hair, and now I'm saying, like, I could have put the brakes on it. Maybe I shouldn't have been so eager. Be careful what you wish for. But I love this, and one of my favorite movies is Network. And, I will freely admit that I stole from Peter Finch at his performance as Howard Beale. But I think his plays are lovely. The first one that I read was Tom Paine, and I've been thinking about that. I don't know, at least several times a month it comes into my head for some reason. So yeah, his plays, anytime there's an opportunity to work on one, I jump at it. And, I hate to say this, but like, not a lot of my thinking really changed about the play over the decades.
Greg and I go way back, and
Yeah.
and you are just an interesting person in that he makes up, like he designs full sets and just goes ahead and performs monologues in his home for plays that he may do someday. He just never knows for sure.
I've got pre-production finished on about 18 plays that I'm going to try to trick someone into letting me do something.
And we didn't actually audition anyone else for that part. Like we basically were like, we're doing this play, Greg's Frank, because we know him so well and have that history and knew how he felt already.
People think it's
about
hilarious
the play.
when I get mad too. They think it's so funny to watch me being mad. So I got to do that a lot in this one.
Well, we would love to have some questions or just sharing of experiences from the audience. Yeah, thank you.
So obviously this is pretty what's the word I'm looking for? Not surrealist. Absurdist. Yes. How do you access material like that? Because yes, it's got a lot of truth to it, but at the same time it's kind of jarring, the language. It's foreign to a lot of people, especially to an audience. How do you guys get into that?
I think one thing in Will Eno's plays is, like in the case of Tom Paine, he knows that he's butchering hackneyed expressions, and he's doing it on purpose. I always felt like in this one, the people are doing it because they are dancing as fast as they can, and are at the end of their ropes, and like the worst world in the world, things like that. Or not being able to think of the next thing to say, and I think in this one it's like they're doing it by accident a lot, but then in a lot of plays the people are very knowingly being funny, but I don't know. It's like Beckett always made a lot of sense to me too. Is like what do we've got 2 hours on stage, and we're dancing as fast as we can, and like the predicament mirrors the fictional action on stage. The actor's predicament. We got to fill all this time and make it work. I don't know. To me, it's like doing a play like this. The doing of it feels a lot like what the people in the play are living through.
There's also the quality, when you do something that has an element of absurdism but still is emotionally grounded, of finding the strange in the familiar and finding the familiar in the strange. And so what I mean by finding the strange in the familiar, there's that great moment where Elizabeth is not on camera, so she sings, and you get an opera snippet, and then you get a little bit of 99 bottles of beer on the wall. And it's strange and funny and unexpected, but what you're watching is really just the strange and the familiar, which is we all know that if we're just wasting a little time, our brains will kick off this little thing and that little thing, and they don't necessarily have a lot of rhyme or reason to them. So that's funny, I think, because we recognize it as true. And then the familiar and the strange is, the premise of the play is strange. Like this idea that the sun went down and it seems like it's never going to come up again. So you've got that sort of strange premise, and that's the sort of thing that makes people think about Beckett. But they all react so familiarly, even if it's specific, right? They get afraid. That's not strange. That makes sense. In a strange situation, we would get afraid. We would get curious. We would try and explain it. We would look to, I said to Tamarie, one of my favorite characters in the play is the governor, who we never see. But, when things are going crazy, this idea that you look to a leader and the leader is not capable of receiving your cry for help, right? Again, it's... So, in other words, I don't think you ever want to, lean into the idea that we're doing a strange, unfamiliar, theatrical style, because that doesn't give these folks a lot to do. You just, you find what's true and accessible in the weird play.
I think it's what we have such a history cut my teeth on absurdism, and so it doesn't feel absurd to
Right,
me.
right.
I mean, life is happy and sad and all these things, and so it just I think when I approach anything like that in these plays, it's just, I guess my life feels absurd. So it is just the mainstream for me is this.
Right, and one of the over the years, one of the mantras in catastrophic theater, at least about the last decade or so, is there's a line in the play Endgame, to reference Beckett again.
Yeah.
Nothing is funnier than unhappiness. I grant you that.
Yeah.
And so the idea that nothing is funnier than unhappiness is really on display here. Some of the saddest, most existential crisis kind of lines are the truest and funniest things, because there is something about being sort of like, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed and alone and vulnerable, and we have a very particular kind of laugh where we don't laugh at that, and so it's a very humane kind of laugh that we laugh in a play like this. It's a laugh of, oh, I know what you're going through. It's that little animal barking sound that we make to let other members of our species know that this is good and this is okay, and so that's that kind of branch of the laughter tree that this kind of provokes.
The other thing I love about Will Eno's plays is that even though he is referred to as this modern day absurdist, and the premise in these plays, absolutely, but I always say that he is an absurdist with a healthy dose of kindness. There is a gentle quality, even in this play. It's the end of everything, and yet he's tucking you in and saying sweet dreams. So,
Well, and then, it just occurred to me, I had never thought of this, but these newscasters and reporters trying to cover the end of the world isn't really much more absurd than the band playing as the Titanic sinks,
Yes.
And there's something just really, I think, beautiful and dignified and courageous about, we're going to do our jobs until the last possible second. Stay with us. We'll be here with you. It's all going to be okay. Or it might be going to be okay.
You might be going to be
fine.
Yeah.
And what I love with that idea is that all of them begin to slowly fade out. And it's kind of like we can't go any further, and it's like aging. You finally just begin to slow. And then we only have the only one at the end is the youth. And that moment of, wow, this is, we're going to repeat that again. You're headed there. But it's so refreshing for me as an audience member going, oh, yes, what. Because right from the beginning, I was wondering, there's no way out of here. How is this going to wrap up?
Was it hope? Did he represent hope to you?
I don't know. It's just kind of like we will go on. We're going to be
Beckett
there.
again. I can't go on. I'll go on. Yeah, look at us.
We're taking a secret test.
But Tamarie, you talked about that when you put CastJayden.
Yeah,
I did.
I
did. It's not. It doesn't specify the age of the witness, and we read several of our typical actors of all different ages, and there was there's something about this little innocent face here.
But only when he's shaved.
But there is something. It did become. I mean, I did. Listening to the text, he does say, "You spoke at my school," when he's referring to Frank.
Yes,
So,
he says that.
okay, well then he is younger than Frank. But there was just something again about having the everyman at the end be such a sort of classic image of youth and innocence.
And I think that also because typically it is somebody that's like in, I think, their early 30s, maybe late 20s that's playing the witness. And I think that just kind of piggies back to Tamarie's, I think, really cool direction for the show and what, she wanted to do with the show. Yeah.
You're really Basque.
Yeah.
Tamarie, in the stage directions about it, does he talk about everybody kind of fading out, where they're kind of like the night kind of overtakes them?
It doesn't have it doesn't say anything as far as the lights go down on Michael.
It says Frank seems to be sleeping.
Right. So that's really it. But you see each one of them does have their own sort of voyage, and they all do sort of come to their climax and then come down. So it just worked itself out that way.
But and about that, I thought that the technical production, the scenery, and especially the cueing of the lights, was stunning.
We have great designers.
Yeah.
We really do.
Yeah,
Hudson Davis is our lighting designer. Ryan
He's
Gettigan.
going to go to the 80 players. He's going to be.
He works there. He's their what is it? He's like their supervisor of all lighting and sound when people come into the. Yeah, he works for the TD mic over there. Yeah. So yeah, we got our mitts on him pretty early when he was still at U of H.
Yeah.
And he likes us, so he keeps coming over here. Yeah, I got you. And then Ryan McGettigan did the set. Of course, he's brilliant. And Jazz, Yasmin Zapata did sound. And props.
Tamarie did costume.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And, yeah. And,
I don't know what Jovan's wearing in this. It's just like, I want that coat you're wearing.
well, you can get it on Amazon Prime. That's how I costume everything now.
Can I ask the actors how you research for your character, and especially Elizabeth? I loved your reporter voice, which is so different from yours. And did you work on like a specific person that you kind of adopted and worked on it? Because it was really spectacular.
Oh, thanks. I wish I had a really interesting answer, but I don't.
I'm just talented.
It's that public versus private persona, and just a voice that we might put on if you're on camera. I do in my real life. I've been a corporate spokesperson, so maybe there's something that's just out of my day job that kind of bled through. But it wasn't. And we did work on in the rehearsal period about those moments when we're the reporter versus we're the person. And so trying to distinguish that.
When you're just talking
yourself.
to Frank or to yourself versus you're talking to your camera audience.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you just, I don't know, she had some connection to this lady from the get-go. It was so great.
Love the script.
I don't even think it's as much your voice, it's your cadence too, would change a lot.
So I work in journalism for my 9 to 5, so this show is especially poignant in that regard. Especially those key moments like your monologue about wanting to be someone people trust and people turn to, and your responding reassurance of, I like the news. Those few words, just hit me right here. But I have a question for the cast. That first sort of jarring atmospheric shift from playful satire to complete somberness and gravity, what were you channeling? You seemed to break down. It was right after his first outburst. What were you channeling in those silences where your faces were contorted and the grief was palpable?
I think just for me, it's just the realization of that there's no more structure, and because humankind invents all its own rules. And so when those don't exist anymore, what am I an expert in if those don't exist? And I started substitute teaching this year, and I do K through 4 drama.
So sorry.
And no, it's great. It's honestly great. But then there have been some days, where I'm feeling shitty, and you have to go on anyway, and you talk to the kids, or you try to get the kids to shut up, and then they won't, and then you're feeling bad, and then you think that you're bad. And so then there was one day where I just sat there in front of 20 first graders, and they eventually got quiet and just looked at me, and I had nothing to say to them. And they were just like, Mr. Kaplan, is everything okay? I'm like, yes. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to go on. So I was just there's a lot that I experienced this year. I was like, I'll just do that.
First graders.
A thing that happened with me, everything gets weird when all of a sudden my coworkers are speculating on my private life, and I realize this is what everyone thinks of me, and it's really embarrassing. But I'm also at my desk. I can't go anywhere. have to kind of just, I don't know, to me, one of the funniest things in the world is the guy in the tuxedo who sits on a whoopee cushion or trips and falls into the mud but gets up and keeps trying to maintain dignity. Mm-hmm. I think that's, it's a beautiful and a hilarious and to me heartbreaking thing. And those have always been my favorite roles. And movies where that happens, you know, like things that I've seen since childhood, I'll watch again and again and again if they have stuff like that. But, you know, you know, this is like a local news King Lear for me.
Also, I can't really see the audience. Like the light is in my eye, and with the glasses, there's a glare, and I can stare out, and I have no idea if there's one person or 100 people, not including like the sounds or laughter or not, but just I can't see anything. So I just look out and I'm like, yep, it's black, it's dark, there's nothing out there.
It's like looking in the camera, you know, you gotta trust the people.
Yeah, you just, okay, they're
It is one of the interesting things in the play, and somewhat of a challenge for the actors in that you're acting together and you're listening and responding to each other, but there is never any physical contact or eye contact, except for at the very end where you get to look at Frank. So that is, I've been in we were in another play like that, a Mikkel Marha play called Song About Himself, where the characters never actually looked at each other until the very end. And
or Designated Mourner.
Designated Mourner, well, too, yeah. So we like to do that.
If there is a play where people don't touch or look at each other.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, obviously, it's structured that way to create the alienation from each other, but still trying to make connections to other people in the unknown. So.
And he's the only one who gets to leave. Everyone else, you know, there's no last names. It's John in the field. He lays down in the bed in the field, and she sits on, you know, at the house. And he's stuck behind his desk. He's the only. Well, I guess you leave too, but.
I'm a weird guy. I'm just all over into
He's
nothing.
He's on the steps. Yeah. Everywhere he goes on the steps.
I have a curiosity question. I was a little bit surprised with Brian, your character there, when all of a sudden he speaks Spanish. And the fact that it was written into the script, I'm taking it, yes. But to me, I don't look Hispanic, but my heart is very Hispanic. And I all of a sudden saw myself in that character. In that moment, I was just wondering are you Hispanic?
I am. I don't. Both my parents are from Argentina, and I was born here. But I have the same issues anytime that I go for an audition, like through commercials and stuff, and they specify, must be fluent in Spanish. That's what they say. That's what they say when I get the first email. Must be fluent in Spanish. Okay, yeah, I'll go. And then I get there. And then the director and the casting agents are like, oh, okay, yeah, please step over there. And, you know, you don't have to speak Spanish, so you can just say it in English. I was like, yeah, but I speak Spanish. You do? Yeah.
Are you Spanish speaking from the beginning?
I speak Spanish fluently. English was my first language, but I spoke Spanish all throughout my life, and then more so in my teens.
Pero yo comencé solamente en español.
No, yo en inglés.
I learned English when I started in kindergarten. But up till that point, it was
you were in some telenovelas too in your youth, I believe.
When I did Carrasco Lendas at UT, yeah.
Yeah,
my mother's from Venezuela, so.
Oh yeah.
My father was gringo who went to Panama and met my mother there.
When I was casting that role, I did not have it in my head that I had to cast a Latino actor, but it just sort of worked out. And then I was like, well, he's going to actually speak Spanish well. So.
But to me, that felt perfectly correct, and that's why I was surprised.
I don't know how to respond, but that because that's just a lovely. It's a lovely comment, and I have no.
We do have time for another couple of remarks or questions if people are still thinking about things they'd like to discuss. Yeah.
What do you think the show has to say about how the media is treated today? Since it was written years ago, is it predicting the downfall of trust in the media that certain people in Washington D.C. are crusading against?
I don't really see them as failing, actually. I think that in the preface of the play, which we did print in the program too, it talks about how the reporter is our stand-in, is our person for us to identify. He is the voice for us, trying to make sense of it all. And so I think that they do actually, as best as they possibly can, succeed in that job. So I don't think it's a real they're morons, the media. But I think it does let you see that thing that we do sort of spoof of the 24-hour newscast,
Yeah, but it's also, and this is part of the conversation that Will and I had in the background of the play, is that these are not cable news people. These are local affiliate, like the local NBC station or the local ABC station or what have you. And so the folks that you may well see in the grocery store, or that, my dad was a sportscaster for the local NBC channel where I'm from when I was a kid. And so people would see him, and would be out grocery shopping, and they'd go, "Hey, I know you," And so there is a different kind of emotional relationship that folks have if they watch a lot of local news, and so that's something that we were interested in, which is this this very manufactured and yet nonetheless very real connection that people have with the person that comes into their home every day at 6 o'clock, and then maybe, or every day at 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock or whatever it happens to be.
And it is more generational, because I definitely.
Yeah, my grandmother would refer to all the local anchors by their first name, as if, well, Ron was over last night, and he was telling me about the apartment fire, but she called them all by their first names, and she had her favorite, and that was Ron Stone. But it's.
I did like Ron Stone.
Yeah.
and so, if anything, the 20-year distinction of when it was written till now may give us a bit of a feeling of nostalgia and a feeling of loss for that kind of a relationship, where you just really trust the person who is on the television telling you about the new city park that's opening, or whatever it may be,
or is presiding over the opening of a new supermarket.
Yeah.
You said in that first table read you discussed the context of the storms and whatnot. Was there specific disaster footage or specific channels or specific anchors that any of you studied or referenced when you were preparing for the play?
I showed you guys a couple of clips in some of the rehearsals, just some of the, I think I Googled 72-hour into 9/11 coverage on 9/14 just to see, and you did have moments where what was interesting was they were, obviously something horrific had happened, but at that point, nothing else was actually happening. And they just kept, cutting back to they spent 2 hours talking about which former presidents and senators were going to be at the National Cathedral for the memorial. And then we'll cut to this person who is at the cathedral, where we will be expecting these people. And if you had just turned it on, it would maybe be news. But sitting there and watching 2 hours of it, they were just saying it was on this cycle of the same thing over and over again. So some of us looked at that.
There too, there was the feeling that nothing was happening, but everybody still had that feeling of, I hope that we're going to be able to save people.
Yeah.
There was still that feeling we're waiting until we can pull out the first baby or dog, or until we can save that first person, and then it just didn't happen.
Yeah.
But there was that feeling that, it's going to.
And then during the day when Imelda was happening, I was texting you and I was like, dude, this woman right now literally just could not make the words happen. She'd been going for 6 hours or something, and she was like, here is a picture of a house that has been flooded. And I'm sorry, I have just been going, the words are difficult. I mean, she even said that. And I was like,
I did look up when Ted Cruz was filibustering and then he read Green Eggs and Ham. I did look up a bunch of those kind of clips.
I wish you'd done his role from The Crucible.
Oh, sorry.
No, yeah. Go.
But there's something that Will said, in an earlier interview, that he was still working odd jobs, and he had a job cold calling people for hours upon hours upon hours, and he started finding a certain degree of artistic inspiration in exhaustion and in the way that a kind of word salad would come out of his mouth, but then after the fact, he could note that certainly a lot of what he said was just gobbledygook, but certain things that came out of his mouth were really interesting. And in the interview in the program, he talks about one of those reporters from 9/11 who had been so around the bend tired, like we're talking about, who's meant to say bomb-sniffing dogs, but said dog-sniffing animals. And he said, well, that's an interesting phrase, isn't it? And so it's almost like, I know we've been talking about absurdism, but there's a kind of connection to surrealism and the unconscious when we enter a sort of waking dream state where we're so tired that the barrier between the waking mind and the dreaming mind starts to get really, really thin. And some of the illogical juxtapositions that you see in surrealism start to creep into the things that are coming out of our mouths.
Yeah, it occurs to me that the play doesn't ever do, like, we're in hour 73 of our coverage or anything like that. You don't, and it's a short play, so you don't really know exactly how exhausted they are. But it feels like they are. We begin with everybody close to the end of their ropes.
I still don't think it's completely that you are seeing the literal hour either. I mean, because we see the arc that each of them makes is certainly over more time than that. But we talked too about, like, is there a chance that the sun's going to come back? Or is it really just that this is it? Is it going to repeat? Like, does this happen every night and then the sun comes back and then everyone freaks out again when night happens? But I think we sort of came to the conclusion that, at least for our
I think there was something
very
concrete and literal in the play, and I don't remember what it was, that says, oh no, that couldn't be the case.
Right, it was something like for weeks, or there was something in there that made us realize it wasn't.
Your question about how do you approach something absurdist like that, not getting bogged down in that very question is a part of it too. Like, I would read this and I'd be like, what is this every night? Is this the same night? Can you go back and kill your old self? Because then you didn't go into the future. I was like, but I think you just don't do that and say the words. And,
it's kind of, that's what we do.
So at their heart, I would say newscasters are just storytellers. Did you find, like, a level of relation with your character based on the fact that that's what you are as well?
That's very flattering. I don't know. Storyteller.
Any play, anything, people are people, and you just try to be a person in whatever the situation, however strange or dark or crappy or great or whatever is. So I guess so. I guess I hadn't necessarily thought of it that way. They were just people who were facing the question, what? like what do I do? What is this all about? And
also day one, like what Rob, your opening remarks, day one of rehearsals. These people are dealing with the end of the world, and it's through the very narrow aperture of their very specific jobs, and I thought that was exactly what I needed to hear, frankly. But yeah, until you said that, that hadn't occurred to me like that. I was thinking of a guy who's just trying to keep this together somehow.
Yeah, I know for me at the end, just because of the format of the play, and we're all talking out, and you're talking to a camera, right? So you for me, when I come out at the end, I can't really see anybody at first because the light's on. So it does it feels, what else would be different for me in real life? It's like I'd have clothes on that were kind of normal, and I'd grab the microphone and talk. So it's like, I feel like it's not so far-fetched from reality or whatever for me, but I don't know.
It is for me. I think I only wear suits in plays.
That's true.
And with that announcement of Greg Dean's new business card,
I only wear suits and plays.
we will conclude today's Talkback. Thanks everybody for watching
guys.
today.
Thanks for staying on.
As always, if you like a piece of theater, tell people about it.
So go see Tragedy, a Tragedy by Will Eno, produced by the Catastrophic Theater at Match, located at 3400 Main Street, Houston, Texas, 77002. Get more information at catastrophic.theater.com or matchhouston.org. And there's one more plug, and this is for myself, Melody Gray. I'm in a play at Theater Southwest. We're doing Enchanted April, and I play Mrs. Graves. We run from October 25th to November 16th. For more information, go to www.tswhouston.org. Thanks so much for listening.